What's up, everyone? We're here for post-game Locked On Bucks, and we're happy after a game one, which, as we know, has not exactly been a common occurrence with the Milwaukee Bucks, but they beat Boston on the road in game one. Giannis was spectacular. Jrue was spectacular. The defense was spectacular. So we're going to break it all down and see where the Bucks got it right and potentially where the Celtics may have some room for improvement as well, because this was a really impressive performance from Milwaukee. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday. Also on weekends post-game during the playoffs. You can find my other stuff at ESPN if you're interested. Joining me, the founder of brewhoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden, for today's episode that is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And of course, we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every day. And we thank you for being patient today. I've had a number of messages from people saying, where is the podcast? Where is the post-game podcast? It's been hours since game one. We're recording this right now at 10:36 p.m. Central Time. The one thing I do want to point out, Frank, is that I took one for the team on Twitter here a little while ago and said that, we're recording this late because I needed to get some sleep after this 3 a.m. tip. But because the backlash has been so severe, I want to retract my tweet and say that the reason we're podcasting so late is because you weren't available earlier. So it's Frank's fault, not my fault. I just want to clear that up, Frank.
Yeah, I was visiting my sister in East Texas this weekend. My wife was out of town. I packed up my daughter, my 4-year-old, and our 2 dogs, hauled over for 4 hours on Friday to visit my sister and niece and their family. And then we watched the game today. And obviously couldn't have been happier to drive 4 hours through pretty like empty farmland territory for much of it after the Bucks won the game. But it did mean I got in at around 8:00 tonight. And then I have a 4-year-old and I had to feed her and entertain her for a little bit and then put her to bed and yada, yada, yada. It's been a very, very long day. But
let me just say, if Justin Superbuck or someone that's a meme lord is like good at doing this kind of stuff, that meme where that guy's like in the car and he's like, yes, sir. If someone could put Frank's face on that meme, that was him driving home after this game one.
I actually don't know that meme, but just you doing that for me, Kane, I thoroughly enjoyed you doing that thing that you just did. So
wait till you see it. You will love it.
Hopefully people are watching on YouTube got to see what Kane just did. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I don't know how much sort of national audiences are aware of the Bucks' first game in a series problems. But it has become almost a joke at this point how bad the Bucks tend to be after long layoffs, how bad they tend to be in the first game of series. Last year, of course, we don't probably need to tell this audience that they went down 2-0 in the 2 series that they didn't have home court in. The record leading up to, if they're 1-5 in the previous 6 game ones before last series, and obviously they win against Chicago, but it was not pretty. And so with that as the backdrop, so much talk about the Celtics, the hot streak they've been on over the past few months on both ends, really. They, had the best point differential in basketball for the past few months. They didn't annihilate the Nets, but they sweep the Nets, win the games in close fashion. We obviously kind of talked about last week, sort of like, well, what does that mean, right? Like, how much do we take away from that? And I think what we saw from this game, though, pretty well aligned to sort of what we expected in terms of what have the Bucks been doing. The Bucks forced them to shoot a ton of threes. They shot a ton of threes. They shot them fine. They were 36%. Celtics really shot their average from 3. And the Bucks, what did we say the Bucks had to do? Well, they had to make some threes. Ended up not being a super hot 3-point shooting game right there. I think they were 10 out of 20 at one point. Maybe at halftime, I think they were 10 out of 20 or something like that. Only 12 for 32, so they didn't shoot the lights out. They didn't shoot it well at all in the second half. But they got out on the fast break. They didn't just let this game become a half-court drag-out affair. because it was ugly for both teams for the most part. The defenses were really good in the half court, but the huge difference was the Bucks, 28-8 in fast break. After turning it over a bunch themselves to start the game, they really kind of buckled down, got their composure back. And, Giannis, not an efficient scoring game for him, but, whereas last year in that Brooklyn series, remember it was like, how many screens is Giannis, setting? Giannis become a roller. This series is not that series that, we saw today. Even when he doesn't have his A game as a scorer, he can dictate, the terms of engagement, and he can control a game, really on both ends to a large extent with his tool set. And, the triple-double today scored enough and ultimately gives the Bucks a huge win with some really important supporting cast performances from the people you needed to get him from, right? Jrue Holiday, I thought, really stepped up, made big shots, made big plays on both ends. Bobby Portis, of course, did what he's done since he's moved to the starting lineup. Grayson Allen, Pat Connaughton made some shots. Jevon Carter gave him good minutes off the bench. Wes Matthews did the unsung defensive work that he's been doing all series. So, it was not pretty, but I think this was a bit of a statement from the Bucks, probably about their defense, showing that for all the talk about the Celtics and the awesome defense that they have, which, again, we saw that for long stretches today. The Bucks won a championship last year, relying heavily on an awesome defense. And certainly over the past 2 weeks, they have seemingly been able to flip the switch. And the streak they're on right now, just as far as, the defensive rating numbers are, it's pretty crazy. And again, I think maybe we devalued it against the Bulls because we said, the Bulls, what do the Bulls have? But the Bulls have some offensive talent, and the Celtics do too. I think it's obviously a bigger test here against Boston, but at least in game one, we saw that the Bucks certainly can make the Celtics really have to work offensively. And, we'll get into the numbers a little bit, but just some pretty wild numbers, in terms of just the 2-point shooting in particular today, just a dominant performance from the Bucks doing what they do best.
Yeah, as we continue to dive into it, you mentioned numbers, so I'm going to do this. Otherwise, we'll go forever, and then I'll get in trouble. Let's talk about our friends at BetOnline.net, which is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. And it was interesting. You saw the odds for the favorite, and this is so funny, like how quickly it happens. But I think the Bucks were basically the fourth favorite to get out of the East, because the assumption from the betting markets was that Boston was going to win this series. Of course, they still could, but you swing one game, and all of a sudden now I saw some stuff, and you can check it out at betonline.net, and now the Bucks are the favorite to get out of the East. So one game swings that all. But if you're into that type of thing, go to betonline.net, and you can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of baseball season. Well, it's been going for a little while there. But BetOnline is a continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting, playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. Also, check out, this is interesting, the Bucks in the middle of a playoff run. They do have a first-round draft pick, though. So check out the Locked On NBA Draft Big Board. You got 3 days off after game 2 here this week. Maybe check out some draft content. Look ahead to the future. You can do that with the Big Board Draft podcast on the Locked On network there. So you mentioned the defense, and I just was laughing at some of the possessions with some of the blocks that Brook, Lopez had, and Giannis. Like, it was seriously like a child trying to shoot at a mini hoop, and the adult, the way that they were swatting those balls. So the stat, and I think Kirk Goldsberry from ESPN was the first one that tweeted it out, but the 10 2-point field goals is just a laughable number. Now, is that sustainable for the rest of the games? You wouldn't think so, but you came up with a good point that I think at least half of them had to be on offensive putbacks, and we saw it when the Celtics were able to get in kind of transition, semi-transition. There was a couple of times where they're able to get to the basket. You force Giannis or Brook to commit, and then Williams or whoever it was able to clean up. And that was early in the game when the Bucks looked like they were still trying to figure things out. But after that, this was physical dominance. And it was interesting because this was one of the things, and I had a number of Bucks fans saying, can you just push back a little bit more on these crossover pods? And I'm like, well, if you've been listening to me for long enough, you understand how I tend to go about things. I say what I think. If you want to say all this stuff, it's fine. But the one thing I did push back on was that I think physicality suits this team. I've been saying it for the last few weeks. I said it in the last series. The more physical this gets, I think the Bucks are going to love it more. And a big reason for that is because Giannis, the most physical player in the entire NBA, but B, the Bucks don't have guys that are naturally trying to draw fouls or seek the attention of like Jrue Holiday isn't flopping. He's not and look, Marcus Smart is a good defender, but we saw it again tonight. He spends a lot of the night on the floor trying to draw charges and those types of things. It's not how Jrue Holiday plays the game. It's not how Brook Lopez plays the game. And then when you add Bobby Portis in the paint as well, if they're allowed to play physical, I just think there's no question that it suits the Bucks, and particularly the longer this series goes. So this was a scrappy game. And I think both teams, fans of both teams would look at this and say, well, we probably missed out on some calls. But I would say you also were lucky that there weren't more calls. The only one that they called, Frank, that was obvious was Giannis absolutely steamrolling Jason Tatum for his fourth foul. They did call that one. But overall, this was as physical game as I can remember for a while. And I think that suits the Bucks right down to the ground.
Yeah, especially with the Bucks going big with their starting five, right? Boston has great positional size with their normal starting five, with Horford, certainly an oversized four. Tatum and Brown have very good size on the wings. They've become very strong defenders, and obviously Marcus Smart. You'd say in almost any other series, other than if he's playing Jrue Holiday in the Bucks, would be the stronger, more physical starting point guard. So it definitely is a unique matchup in that regard, and one that I agree the Celtics actually do have to cope with a physical team. I mean, we saw, I'm pretty sure, I think some of those games against Brooklyn, there were a lot of offensive rebounds that the Celtics gave up, which is one of the reasons I think the Celtics or the Nets were able to stay in one or two of those games. But it's night and day, right? I think one of the concerns playing the Bulls was, is this going to get you ready to play a much better Celtics team, right? But I think especially from Celtics offensive standpoint, I don't think playing the Brooklyn Nets, you think about what prepares you to play this Bucks defense. I definitely don't think playing, the Brooklyn Nets, who are rotating Patty Mills, Kyrie Irving, Goran Dragic, and Seth Curry, and having at least two, sometimes three of those guys on the floor at all times. They spent the whole series just picking which mismatch they wanted to attack because the Nets were switching everything and they always had small guys on the floor. Today, the Bucks had far fewer guys that they could really attack. We saw Marcus Smart early go right at Grayson Allen for a couple of nice plays. I think Grayson really buckled down the rest of the game and kind of settled down a fair bit. But for the most part, I mean, the way that Jrue and Wes in particular, when those really high screen and rolls come, they spent all series against DeMar DeRozan basically saying, I'm taking away your right hand. You want to set a screen going to your right? I'm sitting on the screener's hip basically, and I'm saying you're not going that way. I'm funneling you towards Brook Lopez, and if you want to try to set up, a pick and pop for Al Horford, we'll live with that, right? And we saw Al Horford, I think, shot 60% from three in the last series. Obviously, you don't expect him to do that 2 series in a row, knock on wood, hopefully. He hit 4 out of 9 from three today. So, it worked perfectly well for them, but he was 0 for 2 on twos, 12 points on 11 shots. I think you live with that, right? Robert Williams, 3 out of 6, overall 6 points. Again, a couple of those I think were tip-ins, putbacks. I think you live with that. They got one play where they got Brook out on playing a little too high on a screen and roll, and I think that was when Rob Williams got an alley-oop, but they really didn't get a steady diet of that at all. And so, I think, again, so much of it starts with the two wings, Jrue and Wes. I think just not letting Tatum and Brown and even Smart to an extent, not letting those guys play the way they want to, not letting them get really going downhill. And I think as much as the Bulls are not at the level of the Celtics, I do think that there was, a benefit to having to play a guy like DeMar DeRozan, who I think, Tatum's harder because I think as I think you talked about one of the pods last week, Tatum obviously will pull up from three, whereas DeMar is trying to get closer to the foul line, right? So that makes Tatum, I think, tougher to cover in that regard. But Tatum and Brown, the Celtics are 0 for 12 from three today. That's not going to happen again.
Yeah.
by the same token, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I mean, you look at their numbers on mid-range shots. I mean, they are not Kevin Durant or DeMar DeRozan from that range. They can hurt you, and certainly Tatum, he will get hot from that range at times. He can create a shot. He's got good size. But, again, if the game's going to come down to Jason Tatum taking contested mid-range shots, you live with that. And obviously we saw today the Bucks were going to live with the 3-point shooting and the kickouts. And I think the one really notable thing about today, we talked after the last Bulls game, Bucks came into the series 10-1 when they allow 48 or more 3-point attempts, which is kind of just a crazy number. It doesn't seem like you should want to allow that many threes, but typically when that's happening, it's because the teams can't do anything inside the paint. They're not getting the foul line, usually not getting a lot of offensive rebounds. And today, not just, and I've seen different things. I think I'm seeing 50 3-point attempts in the official box score. I think Cleaning Glass at like 49, but 53s again. I think that's the most the Celtics have maybe taken all year, most they've taken in a playoff game. It's a huge number. They made 18. That's fine. 36%, right? Like,
do you think in the fourth quarter, Peyton Pritchard, I was wondering if Peyton Pritchard had some sort of like kicker in his contract if he got the Celtics to 53 point attempts today. What was going on in the fourth quarter, Frank? I was fine with it, but it was unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, they obviously are they are going to, pick your poison. I think the Bucks are much more okay with Peyton Pritchard and Marcus Smart shooting threes against them than Tatum, Brown, etc. And Horford as well, just because of who he's typically going to be guarding against. Those are the guys that are going to get up threes. And I think the notable thing, though, what we saw in Chicago, those last two games, Bucks, we were talking about before the cut. I mean, Bucks didn't really care who was shooting, who was shooting.
Or from where.
Yeah, or from where. I mean, the number of corner threes the Bucks gave up in the last two games was insane, right? It was like 5 of 19 in game 4, and I think something similar in game 5, right? Like a huge number of open threes, over 30 open threes per game the last two games. Today, only 9 corner threes allowed. So, and the Celtics made 6 out of 9 from corner, right? Like the Celtics killed them on corner threes when they had them, but they really didn't give up many corner threes. I think that's actually fewer corner threes than the Bucks give up on average over the course of the season. So really everything was being funneled to those above the break threes. And, of course, those are just harder threes to make because they're further out. And, again, the math, didn't work wildly against the Celtics. It's not like this was an outlier poor shooting performance. Pretty much even 3-point percentages across the two teams, which, again, I thought that was going to be really important. The Bucks make threes today. And I think an encouraging thing is that they didn't have to go crazy from 3-point range. They did early. That got them the lead, but then they were really able to hold the Celtics off without needing to hit tons of threes in the second half. I think they're only 2 for 12, I want to say, in the second half, something like that. So yeah. They actually expanded the lead in the second half, even without the 3-point shooting. And I was a little nervous about that at halftime because I thought, you're relying on the 3-point shot. I think at one point, they were like 8 for 16 from 3 and 8 out of 21 on twos. And it was like, well, I feel like the twos have to do better, but the threes probably aren't going to stay at that rate. But again, the defense was just so good, and the Celtics just really couldn't punish them enough to kind of obviously work up and kind of eat into that deficit.
That's why the longer this game went, just because of the way some of the things were happening, and particularly the first half of the Bucks hitting all those threes, defensively able to keep the Celtics out of the paint. Again, I don't think it would be great if it stays that way. But, there was an utter domination today defensively. So, yeah, you have to imagine the Celtics are going to have better days than that. So that's why as the game was going, I was thinking, geez, you really want to get this game, because if not, you're going to look back and look at some of the numbers and say this is going to be hard to replicate. One other thing that I think was interesting from the Celtics point of view, because I think, and again, I've been saying this a lot, if you haven't been watching the Celtics a lot, it's kind of snuck up on you. And maybe some people are sitting there and saying, well, where's the playmaking on the Celtics come from? And if you listen to the Celtics podcast and Celtics fan, they talk about Marcus Smart. He's become the point guard of this team. He's been really controlling things. The Bucks were playing full court defense from the start tonight. And when we talked about how the matchups worked out, I think the Jevon Carter minutes tonight were incredibly important. I think Mark Jones said something on the broadcast like he's one of the best in the league in full court defense, which at the time, I chuckled at because it's just such a funny comment to say, but mostly because teams just don't do it. but it is something that Jevon Carter does, and he's done it since he first got minutes. And when you talk about if you've got the paint closed down, playing the full court defense, taking it down to 13 seconds before they're able to really do anything, applying that pressure, and also Jevon Carter being able to defend Marcus Smart, so then Jrue Holiday can defend Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum, and just you can maneuver your matchups like that. I just thought, first of all, the idea to play the full court defense as aggressively as they did with, it's not Kyrie Irving out there. I mean, Marcus Smart is not Kyrie Irving. I think it's a good play. Now, it's incredibly taxing, incredibly exhausting way to play defense. But I thought today for the matchups and everything they were able to work off that, the Jevon Carter minutes were as good as you could possibly ask for. And he knocked down a couple shots. He curled around the screen, knocked down a mid-ranger there at one point, had a three, which was a pretty difficult three, go halfway down and roll out. But I just thought a really, really good night for Jevon Carter.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you get him off the waiver wire because of Dragic
and West. Think about the two important defenders.
Yeah, getting, and it's funny, right? Just all year long, right? I mean, Wes has been my sentimental favorite guy, my nostalgia guy. I've been rooting for him. Probably more than obviously I'm like a Giannis fan. Everybody knows that the way I feel about Giannis, but just sort of like in terms of like relative to role, Wes is a guy I've been rooting for so hard all year. It's such a great story coming home after the year away in Los Angeles last year, not getting picked up by anybody through camp, and then to kind of get dropped in. And ironic, his first really like big stage kind of impact was against the Celtics on Christmas Day. You can argue playing huge minutes, being part of that switchable lineup down the stretch against Boston, that big comeback, hitting the huge three in the final minute. And today, again, just staying solid, right? And, I never like to say like, oh, Wes is shutting guys down, whatever. He just plays really solid, plays physically, plays really solid, forces, guys to play within the scheme that the Bucks sort of want guys to play in. And I think he's just such a good running mate for Jrue out there on the court. And again, Carter, the fact that he's been able to just knock down shots at sort of an insane rate, especially from three since he came over. I don't know how long that's going to last, but as you said, a couple of very timely baskets today, and 20 plus 25, I think in 22 minutes. Yeah. I mean, again, it's not like Jevon Carter was, I mean, him and Giannis, I think, were the massive plus minus guys. I think one of those is more indicative of the impact than the others, but I do think it does highlight. The Bucks go down in this game 18-12. They go down 24-17.
Holiday
had all the turnovers. And the bench guys, Grayson Carter, Pat Connaughton, Jevon Carter, Grayson Allen, Pat Connaughton. I mean, those guys, those three, right? Those three are the bench guys at this point. Each of them play between 21 and 29 minutes, and all of them, made shots, made plays, did enough defensively, and all ended up as pluses on the games. Again, you're just going to need that, right? And not that you're going to get this same level of contribution every game, but the starters, in particular, struggled for a long stretch of this game. I mean, Wes was only 2 for 7 for 5 points. So it's not like Wes was lighting the world on fire. But he only had 2 fouls. Jrue only had 3 fouls. And again, to be able to play the level of physicality that they were on the wing against 2 all-stars in Tatum and Brown. And Tatum, coming off that series where everybody's not talking about him as top 5 player. Took the mantle from Durant as, I don't know, the best sort of traditional wing in the East, maybe. I don't know. Probably there's plenty of people probably thinking about him in those terms to come out today and obviously just, 6 out of 18 for Tatum, 21 points, 3 turnovers, -8. I mean, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. I mean, again, Tatum ended up putting up some numbers, if the Celtics, hit more threes, hit more shots and win the game, then, I'm sure the narrative could have gotten twisted into like Jason Tatum, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, they really frustrated him for long stretches. And I mean, again, told us coming into the game that you'd get 6 out of 18 from Tatum, 4 of 13 from Jaylen Brown. Even with those guys, I mean, Tatum was 4 out of 9 from 3, right? I mean, he made threes. Jaylen Brown was 3 out of 9 from 3. made some threes. It's not like he was a bad 3-point shooter. Those guys are like mid-30s 3-point shooters on the year. So it's not like they're, Steph Curry out there. So those guys, hit some threes, and they took a bunch of them. But again, just Bucks just managing to choke pretty much everything else off. And again, Jrue and Wes are just gonna have to keep doing this, and they're gonna need those bench guys we mentioned to continue to contribute night in and night out. I just think back to a couple months ago when the bench was like just really struggling and not giving you much of anything night in and night out. So far this feels more like a year ago when Connaughton was doing what he, just started to do consistently during the playoffs, and obviously Grayson Allen really somehow turned the corner going on the road in Game 3 of that Chicago series, and he just continues to play. 3 out of 6 for him from 3 today brought down his 3-point percentage, right? So, hey, if he wants to just only shoot 50% the rest of the way, I'm okay with it.
No doubt. And I thought you pointed to it, but I thought there was a couple of possessions there where Grayson was, pretty tenacious defensively as well. I thought he was really locked in. So a decent night again for him off the bench. Only one game before Game 2. So I'm thinking the Bucks might need some Built Bars, because I would say that this team would be pretty sore, pretty fatigued after this game. It was a pretty high intensity game of playoff basketball. But summer's coming, Frank. Although I saw the outdoor party in the Deer District tonight, and it looked like Mel and the crew down there had gloves on, which it's starting to get beyond the point where you would hope that that's not the case. But summer is coming, and with summer you're going to need some food on the go. Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on family vacations or to a viewing party at the Deer District. So throw them in your bags, in your kids' backpacks. Make sure everyone has a bar so you're refueled for the summer adventures. And the best part about Built Bar is they're healthy and delicious. No more sacrificing delicious food for health. With Built Bar, you can have both. And it's easy. All you have to do is go to Built.com and order now. The bars are covered in 100% chocolate. As I mentioned, they're healthy for you. And there's plenty of different flavors. You can check them all out. Go to Built.com to get all your favorites. Banana cream pie, raspberry, double chocolate, and so many more. They're all delicious, and the new flavors are coming out all the time. Check them out at Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right. It can't all be perfect, Frank. And, at the end of the day, they scored 101 points in this game. So, look, you pointed to it. The Bucks won a championship in these types of games last year. This is right in the Bucks' wheelhouse. I think, certainly I was like, well, if you lose Chris Middleton, I'm not too worried about the defense, because I think that they're going to be able to cover that with the personnel they have. I wasn't too worried about that side of the ball. But offensively, the easy way to look at this is Giannis 9 for 25, missed a bunch of shots that were kind of head scratches. Now I'm sure that there was probably some contact, and he he makes it always look, getting to the rim, make it look easier than anyone else. So sometimes you don't see the contact. I'm sure he was fouled on a bunch of those, but nonetheless, there's shots that he normally finishes. So there's one way that you think, okay, maybe you can get some more points there. The threes, as you said, cooled off in the second half, and Boston's just a really good defense. So there was some reason to walk away from this again and say, geez, glad we got this one, because this is going to be a scrap. And how are the Bucks going to generate the half-court points? Yeah, you had the offensive rating. You mentioned earlier, I don't know if you mentioned when we were recording, but it wasn't pretty. So let's just say that offensively, the Bucks have still got some stuff to work through here.
For sure. And part of the reason, we haven't really talked much about Giannis, and part of that is because every national place is going to talk about Giannis. And to me, I think it's for one, I think I'm happy because the fact that Giannis has evolved his game such that he can impact being with the ball in his hands for a lot of the game, being a creator, facilitator, a game where he's one of really only two true, creators with the ball, him and Jrue Holiday. They have to pretty much be the engines of the offense for 48 minutes combined. Again, that is a really different ask from a year ago, right? I just think back to Zach Lowe checking the number of screens Giannis was setting every game, and emphasizing how Giannis was going to have to screen more last year in the playoffs than he ever had before. And that was because he had not just Jrue Holiday, but he had Chris Middleton, two really good pick and roll operators who can score for themselves or feed Giannis, or let the gravity of Giannis suck in the defense and create open shots for other guys. And this is just a different series because they're going to need the ball in Giannis's hands a lot more, and it's not always going to be pretty. There's going to be possessions where, again, the Boston defense is going to be really good and make life really hard on Giannis. We saw that today, but you can't just double a pass away. I mean, we saw that Marcus Smart just like doubling into the post, kick out Grayson Allen, bang. Like, Giannis is now at the point where he'll find the guy, he'll find that easy pass. He'll find the guy on the other side, on the weak side with, a leaping hook pass. He'll do stuff that, again, a few years ago, he would not make. Not that he would ever make the play, but he just didn't make it as consistently as he does now. And so, I think that this was, defensively a very good performance from Boston. As you said, though, some of the touch on the layups was just kind of surprising. Like a couple of them just like didn't even get backboard. Just missed a few where, again, I mean, hey, there's guys near him, but like a few of those were like two or three of those where he got by Robert Williams and just overlaid it and just misses a shot. He's the best finisher in the sport. So I think he's going to finish more of those than he's going to miss through the rest of the series. And again, the 3-point shot has obviously been a major question mark. It's been inconsistent, all year, and especially in the playoffs. I think he takes 2 today. Fine with him not pressing the issue on that front. Did hit a few mid-rangers, including kind of a one-legged step back in the fourth quarter, which was, again, part of kind of keeping the Celtics at arm's length. And obviously defensively, when you look at the numbers in Boston's 20 paint points or something like that, and just the struggles to do anything inside the arc, it starts with the wing defense. But Giannis and Brook Lopez, I mean, the work that those guys do, dissuading shots, blocking shots, 2 blocks for Giannis, 3 for Brook. You just can't say enough about what that duo does. And we didn't see a big offensive performance from Brook. I think he's a guy they're going to need to find him at some point this series. He's going to need to have, one of those 19-point on 11 shot type games. I think if the Bucks are going to win this series, he's going to have to pop in and be a safety release valve. Again, just flashing to the paint, making himself big and available for little lobs around the basket. We've seen Brook do that. He's not really a post-up guy anymore, but he doesn't have to be dangerous. And so much credit to those guys, and just really happy for Giannis. I mean, it would have been really annoying if Giannis shoots 9 for 25 and they lose the game, because then the whole narrative post game, regardless of his assist numbers, are going to be about, how the Celtics shut him down or whatever it is. Right. And again, the whatever the line is, right, about, the history books are written by the victors. In basketball terms, sports terms, the team that wins the game, everybody just sort of says that the high scorer did a great job or whatever. But I think it really is a statement about Giannis. Tatum and Giannis both have poor games shooting the ball, but Giannis with his playmaking and his defense, ultimately made a huge effort, made enough big plays. And, again, we just can't take that for granted. And the fact that we've waited this long to talk to him is not a slight on him. But I think this really was a team effort. There's just so many, you can call out 8 guys in the rotation. You can call out 8 guys, the ways that they contributed to winning basketball tonight. Bobby Portis and Jrue Holiday, I think, also deserve a really important mention, because Jrue in particular,
incredible.
Being that, to me, that was the question, right? Can Jrue Holiday be Jrue Holiday offensively in this series? We know he's going to be awesome defensively. 8 out of 20. It's not like he shot the lights out, but 25 points on 20 shots, took care of the ball, and made some timely shots, working to his mid-range, hit those 2 threes early, and you started to feel like, oh, okay, we got good Jrue Holiday today. And for me, probably my favorite Jrue play today, he gets ISO'd. I think it was against Horford, right, in the right corner, and he basically just bullied Al Horford. Al Horford, who played great defense on Giannis today, but Jrue Holiday just basically, grown manned him, drove to the basket, and just cleared space for a layup, like right at Al Horford. Drew's just a special player, and they're going to need him to have efficient volume scoring games, because Again, last year you had Chris or Jrue. None of them. It always seemed like one of them was struggling, right? Usually Chris was doing well. Jrue was kind of looking for a shot. They don't have the same margin for error. They're going to need Jrue to be consistently much more like he was today than what we saw for long stretches in last year's playoffs. And again, just cross your fingers that he continues to deliver like this night in and night out. And Bobby Portis, 15 and 10 every night. What can we say about Bobby? I mean, running his ass off up and down the floor. I mean, we'll see how. I'm sure Boston will try to exploit him more defensively, but they weren't able to do it today. And I think for so much long stretches of this season, especially since Brook has been back and Giannis is around, you just can't target Bobby in the same way that you could, in previous years. And that's just a big credit to him and his work rate.
It's kind of the you kind of flip it for the questions for both of these teams offensively. For the Celtics, how can they score in the paint? And for the Bucks, are they going to be able to continue to score on the perimeter as they did, decently in the first half tonight? But I think for the Celtics, when you talk about how they expose Bobby Portis, and that's what everyone's trying to figure out, well, the problem is right now there's only two guys that the Bucks really give a shit about defensively, and that was kind of the same case. It's not as extreme as it was against Chicago, but it's kind of a similar nature. That's the blueprint for Milwaukee moving forward in this series. Now, we should just mention the Giannis play, the off the backboard two-hand. Now, look, there will be some cynics out there and some people that just want to spoil all the fun for everyone, that are just hoop heads around the world and say, well, look, there may have been a little bit of maneuvering of the pivot foot. And yes, okay, well, look, we can all see, but that was the moment where I thought, okay, the Bucks aren't losing this game. But it was also just, and I tweeted it. And by the way, everyone straight away was like, what about this play? What about this play? But I tweeted and I was like, I got a little caught up. And I said, that might be one of the greatest plays of his career because, and forget the moment. So everyone's like, well, what about the alley-oop against Phoenix? Which if that was just a Tuesday night in Detroit, it's just a Giannis alley-oop. But we understand the moment, all those types of things. But take away the moment, kind of get stuck. It's like, okay, well, what am I going to do here? Can I pass the ball back out to the perimeter? He's like, I'll just pivot again here. Now I'm kind of off balance. So I'm just going to lob it off the backboard. But there's a Boston defender there that should be able to swat this or get this off the glass. So I have to throw it high enough to get over his outreached hands and then dunk it down with two hands right on him. And it's just it's from the actual IQ to the athleticism to then the power of the dunk. It's just the most ridiculous thing. And it was 5:30 a.m. here, and I was up off my couch, Frank. That was a beautiful thing.
I mean, you have to feel bad for Grant Williams. Grant Williams played that possession so well. And then Giannis just, pivots back the other way, sees the opening, and detonates. And I think we've seen, is that maybe the third or fourth time he's done that, this year, actually? It's become something that we've seen him do, every once in a while. And, again, it's a credit to Boston's defense that he had to be really creative in order to, to score on a play like that today. I think it was interesting because, as we alluded to, it did feel like he was able to get downhill and, usually when he brings the ball, when he's coming from his right, sort of going to his left, and he brings the ball over the defender, people usually just say Euro step, right? But it's actually a bit of a I remember when he first started doing that and talking to, I think it was Nathan Walker? I'm trying to remember who it was. And mentioned how Dwayne Wade did this a lot, prime Dwayne Wade, even though he's a smaller guy, great wingspan. And he would do this where he would sort of go across guys and bring the ball over his head. And they called that the windmill crossover because it literally is kind of like a windmill dunk. And Giannis, I mean, we've been seeing Giannis do this for years and years, but I always somebody think of it as almost like a swim move, in football. And it felt like it's kind of funny how few times he managed to finish on that play, but it felt like going downhill, he was able to repeatedly get to the rim without having Boston, just kind of swallowing him up. But unfortunately, it just felt like he blew, 3 or 4 layups that normally you kind of think he would make. So, both teams are going to look for silver linings, as you're going to point out. I think the biggest one for Boston is the their turnovers and the fast break points that came off that. The Bucks are not like some frenetic turnover forcing machine. I think they deserve a ton of credit for congesting things and forcing those turnovers. I mean, Grayson Allen at 3 steals, right? Jrue had another one of the classic Jrue steals. Shout out Eric Name at half court. The Bucks were able to create offense from defense, which they really needed given the struggles in the half court. I expect Boston will clean a lot of that up. But as you said, we certainly would expect Giannis to be better than this on most nights offensively in terms of scoring the basketball. And again, the upside for him is even when he's not scoring really effectively, he can still rely on just the creation and playmaking. And again, that's going to be more important in this series than perhaps any other series he's played, in the NBA, just given the fact that he doesn't have his running mate, Chris Middleton, next to him.
No doubt. And, I think, as we've both pointed out, it was really fun today. And you can't ask for a better start in terms of, being on the road. And now we were in this position a lot last year where we're like, okay, can the Bucks win 4 out of 6? Can the Bucks win 4? Can the Bucks win 4 out of 5? So, that's the challenge now. For
Just
Milwaukee.
split 6. Just split 6. That's all you got to do.
That's right. And hey, they won the 2 games at the Garden going back to 2019. But remember the home court in the series before when no one could win. So, historically, I don't think it's been an easy building for the Bucks to go in and win games. I think it's a pretty rowdy home court atmosphere that they got there. So to get game 1 is obviously huge. Game 2 coming up on Tuesday night. So we'll have a podcast tomorrow.
Let's get greedy. Can we get greedy, Kane, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Game.
Imagine a 3-day break with a 2-0 lead going home. Glorious.
Yeah, game 2. I mean, this is historically where it's like, the road team wins game 1. Yeah. Game 2, the home team always comes out like usually with renewed focus, blah blah blah, and the road team maybe gets a little complacent because they've already banked the win that they wanted to get out of the first 2. It's really hard to win the first 2 on the road when you're talking about a really good team like Boston with obviously a good home court. So, but why not, right? Why not? I mean, I think that's got to be the Bucks' mindset here. Obviously, they're not afraid of anybody. And I think just, a game like this, is great because at least, the national podcasts have to kind of cool it with just the Boston, adoration for like a moment. But hey, win the first 2, then you can put that even further on ice and give yourself a little bit of a margin of error going home. Because I mean, this just feels like the kind of series where, okay, awesome, you won game 1. You might need to win another game on the road, right? You knew you had to win 1 to win the series. Last year in the Nets series, they waited until game 7 to win. In the Sun series, they pulled it out in game 5. Again, margin of error as well as they played without Chris. You can't just assume that you're just going to win every home game. So again, if you're going to need a second road win, might as well do it while the Celtics are still trying to figure things out. We'll see in I guess in a day from when people are listening to this, whether they can pull off the trick and surprise the Celtics twice. Even if they don't, you'd feel pretty good about the first couple of games taking one on the road. But again, let's get greedy and enjoy this, right? Let's, as we were saying a year ago, as you're saying sort of in that Bulls series, enjoy these wins. This is what the playoffs about. Don't fret about what comes after this. And I don't probably for most fans, I mean, this feels like the series in the East right now, right? I mean, if you can beat Boston, I think you're going to have an easier series coming up after. It doesn't guarantee anything, but this to me is the big test in the East, the Boston Celtics. And I don't know, hopefully I have to reevaluate that soon, but fun to steal game 1, even if it wasn't a work of art. And you just hope you can do it 3 more times.
No doubt. Make sure you check out the Locked On NBA podcast as well. I was on there today, so I was talking some more Bucks. So if you're not done with me or my voice at this point in time, you can go and listen to that one as well. And final point, I think it was Ty Lue last year. I think it was last year with the Clippers and Mavericks series. I believe it was with the road court advantage. Maybe this is a road court advantage series. So we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But like I said, we'll be back for a podcast tomorrow. We'll look ahead to game 2. And then we've got 3 days off. So I'm working on some stuff for later in the week. Hopefully we'll have some fun. But like Frank said, enjoy this one anyway. A game 1 win.
You earned it.
I
got my earned NBA champion shirt on for those who are listening on the podcast version, not on YouTube. This felt like the appropriate shirt to wear today, because the Bucks definitely earned game 1. What do you got on, Kane? Is that an old school Bucks?
Ray Allen,
There
which
you
is
go.
appropriate because they are playing for the Ray Allen Cup here in the second round of the Eastern Conference. So
there you go.
We'll see how it plays out. But anyway, apologies for the delay, everyone out there who was desperate for their Locked On Bucks fix. But you can listen to it now. It'll help you get through Monday. That'll be nice for you guys.
Yeah.
We'll be back tomorrow. Make sure you check it out for Frank and myself. Speak to you guys then.